Hey guys, Mr. Ridgway here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Pacific Theater for our lesson today. So again, the theater is just an area of war, and with that in World War II in mind, let's check it out. So the first thing before we actually get into this lesson, please go take your Eastern European map quiz. We'll do this at the beginning of the block. Okay, take some time to review beforehand if you need, and good luck on that. Okay, if you get done early, okay, or if you're just on your own working on this, go ahead and prep for the unit test coming up. But you're going to see today what we're obviously going to be dealing with is the Pacific Theater in World War II. And also, okay, with that, I want you to really focus on being able to explain what the U.S. strategy in the Pacific Theater is, since most of the burden for fighting is really going to be on the United States in terms of World War II. We're going to go ahead and frame it from the U.S. perspective, at least that part of it. But then when we get a little bit later, we're going to look at a couple other battles that'll happen, which are important, such as like the importance of the Battle of Midway. And then we will take a more kind of comprehensive perspective on the choice to drop the 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So once we do that, let's head on to the mini lesson, grab a copy of the notes, and we will get into some of the decisions that are made by the United States on the Pacific Theater. So how do presidents and military leaders decide on an overall strategy in wartime? You're going to see there's some very deliberate choices that get made here. So because the Japanese having expanded after the beginning of World War II for the United States and Pearl Harbor, really the burden is on the United States to think about what they are going to do in terms of defeating Japan. And again, remember the Atlantic Charter, okay, that it said that the United States was really going to be dealing with Germany first, and then focusing kind of on playing against the defensive, and then also, later turning to dealing with the Japanese. The thing that the United States knows, though, is that this war is going to be a naval-focused war. It's the Pacific Ocean, after all. And then there's lots of questions about that then come of this. Like, number one, are you going to invade every single little island that Japan has taken over? And the choice for this early on is no, you're not. There's a strategy developed called island hopping, where the U.S. will hit some islands, usually major ones that were at kind of big supply areas and things like that, and then it would just leave other islands behind to kind of wither on the vine. Again, probably saved a lot of time and a lot of money, as well as probably casualties in terms of that decision being made there. Then we get two really important battles. So the first is the Battle of Midway. If you look back out here at the map, actually on the previous slide, you can see Midway Island is kind of out here near Hawaii, kind of out in the middle of the ocean, as all things are, right? The thing that's important with Midway is that it really is in a lot of ways the decisive turning point of what happens in the Pacific. The reason why is that the U.S. is able to create a very, very successful ambush on basically 4 Japanese carriers, which they send all of them to the bottom with the cost of only one of their own carriers. And we might talk in class about exactly how they do this. And again, why does this matter? Well, aircraft carriers are like the main power in all of World War II. And if you can sink your opponent's aircraft carriers, that gives you a lot of leverage and power over your enemy. And again, the U.S. can't be losing carriers at this point, having lost most of their surface, their existing surface fleet at Pearl Harbor. Besides that, okay, there's also another battle that happens called Guadalcanal. Okay, and Guadalcanal is one of the early island invasions that happens in the Pacific Theater. This one's important because it tells really the U.S. what most of the Pacific Theater is going to be, which is, again, this example of island hopping. And the Japanese, this goes to some of the decisions that their government and culture that their government had emphasized, but both before the United States got involved and during it, where it's this very kind of like fight to the death mentality and, death before dishonor kind of attitude. And it is a step-by-step slugfest for this island. And if, again, Lots more we could talk about here, but this definitely signals for the United States that the conflict in Pacific theater is going to be incredibly bloody, and it's going to take a long, long time, and it does, 4 or 5 years. So again, you can see here, this is kind of the big blue arrows are the general areas where the United States is progressing, okay, in terms of pushing back the Japanese. An arrow pointing to Midway, and then an arrow, pointing to Guadalcanal. So there you go. Which then brings us to ultimately one of the most consequential decisions of the entire war, which is by the time that the United States pushes to the islands around Japan itself, such as Iwo Jima and Okinawa, and then eventually they're ready to invade Japan. The president at the time, okay, whose name is Harry Truman, he learns of a new untested weapon that could be utilized on the Japanese. He can proceed with the land invasion, that otherwise would happen to make Japan surrender. Now, we'll learn more about the controversial decision that goes into this, and we'll get into that here more in a second. But Truman makes the decision to test out these new weapons. And again, you can definitely agree or disagree with this, as you'll soon see. And the first target is the city of Hiroshima. Okay. The next one is actually a different city you probably never heard of, but then that gets changed to the target that you do know, which is Nagasaki. Okay. And we see here for the first time this new terrifying weapon of war in which, you can literally destroy the heart of an entire city with a single plane. It is pulling out the nuclear sword here is one of the largest and most consequential decisions in all of world history ever, because it's simply such a terrifying specter of a weapon. And we'll get into more why that is here in a second. After the second bomb is dropped, okay, Japan then makes the decision to sue for peace, as long as they say their emperor can remain on the throne, which he is allowed to do. And that's kind of how the war ends. That's what we call VJ Day, Victory over Japan Day, at least for the United States. Okay, so what we're going to do then for the rest of the lesson is, if you go on, we've got our exit ticket, which you'll need to do. But then we're going to look at the decision to drop the bomb. And so you've got some different views here, pro view and anti view, and then some more, like, this is a story of somebody on the ground. What if a Hiroshima-sized nuke went off in Indianapolis? What would that actually look like? So you can get a size comparison, and then a 360 video, which is a pretty good introduction. And then right here, we're going to end the block by having you vote, having considered all these resources. So I look forward to hearing what you have to say. All right, see you next lesson. Bye.